Hallo, guten Abend, herzlich willkommen im Depot. Welcome to Depot. I'm very happy that we can start this year with another PhD in practice event. Welcome to our viewers on YouTube. I heard that some of the PhD candidates are sick, but they can join online. They can also post questions if they like, and I can read them later. If you have any questions in the audience, I will come by with the microphone later, even though we can hear each other now. But it's better for those who follow in the live stream. This is a lecture performance by Mohamed Abdelkarim. Welcome. It's called Unbearable Future That Slips Through My Fingers. The title has changed slightly. Maybe we can talk about that later. There will be another PhD in practice event on March 15. We have to figure that out, but we will keep continuing the event series. This is the first episode of the umbrella project Fiction as a Reality We Missed. It's about the future of the infrastructure of the Egyptian space project. And it's about narratives and singing, detecting, doing fictioning. These are all themes that, in Mohamed Abdelkarim's work. And the landscape can be a witness of history we missed and a future we did not attend yet. Mohamed Abdelkarim was born in 1983 in Ilmenia, Egypt, and he studied in Cairo, in Beirut, and in Switzerland. Had several solo shows. There was one in 2021, and there is also currently a group show at the Academy, The Taste of Water, which many of you might participate in, so I don't have to tell you that again. And I'm very excited what you will tell us about the space odyssey in Egypt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Enjoy the evening. You can stay later. There will be drinks at the bar. And I'm happy you're here. Thank you.
I'm not going to write about the future again. I'm not going to write about no future either. I will write about the process of becoming other, vibration, selection, recombination, recomposition. I'm not quite sure what makes me think lately about the future. Driven by a negative attitude towards the future, not as a psychological effect, but as a rational and critical tool to think about living reality. I'm driven by negative speculation, negativity, and I wonder if negative speculation and negativity can be a tool as a counter-speculation. Counter-speculation to resist the dominant speculation of the state and the capital. I'm not sure. I carry on a series of questions. For example, why do I feel the urge to speculate? Why do I feel the urge not only to think about the future, but also to determine and locate where the future is, in front of me, or I'm missing it back there? Or has it collapsed over all this time? I'm asking if the authoritarian speculation of the state is based on the continuity of promises? Questioning, am I able to utilize negativity as a means to critique the prevailing image of the future? So today I would like to share with you a series of concepts that I was able to grasp while thinking about the future. Thinking about the futures with S. Time, science, myth, infrastructure, and speculation. I will move through several futures with S. I will move through fiction materials, sci-fi novels, movies, governmental propaganda, interviews, and mythological texts. I will present a collage of characters, some of which overlap with each other's, and some of which do not. Some of which are reliable characters, and some of which are not. I will attempt to weave them all into a narrative of how the future is negotiated in infrastructure. I will share a nonlinear notion of time, in which time collapses, in which what one would call it past, present, future collapses into a unity, a constellation of events and characters. I will try to tell time not as a linear sequence of events, but as a constellation of events in which we can move in an infinite spiral within these events, rather than going back and forth. When the future is no longer a horizon that moves when we move, but an event that can be reached. When the future becomes a wall against which we pump. I will share with you three stories in 3 chapters.
القاهرة صباح السبت أول يناير عام 2067 في صاروخ متجه من القاهرة إلى لندن. في مقعدين متقابلين جلس الدكتور شاهين والمهندس عبد الكريم، كل واحد منهما يبدو كأنه نسخة من الآخر، وكأنهما توأمان، مع أن أولهما مصري والثاني عراقي. وكذلك كان كل ركاب الصاروخ نسخا متشابهة من صورة واحدة، وكأنهم إخوة أشقاء، مع أن كل واحد من جنسية مختلفة، خليط من إنجليز وفرنسيين وأمريكان وروس وصينيين ويابانيين وهنود وأندونيسيين وسنغاليين وإسكيمو. نعرف ذلك من الأسماء، لأن أحدا لا يحمل باسبورت عليه إشارة بجنسيته أو بلده. كل ما تحويه بطاقة السفر من معلومات هي الاسم والسن وفصيلة الدم ورقم البروتين والمكافئ المغناطيسي والمعادل الكهربي والحمولة العصبية، مجرد شفرة جبرية ورموز وأرقام، هي كل الدلالة على شخصيته. التفت الدكتور شاهين من نافذة الصاروخ إلى السحاب الذي يتطاير كقطن مندوف وقال متثائبا: مضت 3 ثوان وربع على قيام الصاروخ، لقد بدأت أشعر بالملل. ومصمص بشفتيه: لا أفهم كيف كان أجدادنا يحتملون ساعات من السفر في طائرة تسير بمحرك، سلحفاة لاكعة تقطع الكيلومتر في دقيقة. تصور الفظاعة، كانت على أيامهم هي الإكسبريس الطائر، وكل 100,000 كيلو تنزل لتملأ خزاناتها بالبنزين. بنزين! تصور طائرة تملأ خزاناتها بنزينا. البنزين الذي لا يعجبك كان هو الذهب السائل في تلك الأيام. من يملك البنزين كان يملك العالم. البدوي الفقير الذي كان يعثر على بئر بترول كان يتحول بقدرة قادر إلى مليونير. كانوا تلك الأيام يحفرون الأرض بأظافرهم لاستدرار هذا الطفح والعطن بأي سبيل. لو أنهم الآن بعثوا من قبورهم ليروا هذا الذهب الأسود الذي عبدوه ملقا في مزبلة واحدة مع الفحم والحطب والقوالح، من حسن الحظ أن أحدا لا يبعث من قبره.
All we know about Dr. Shaheen is what we got from the 1993 science fiction novel Man Under Zero by Mustafa Mahmoud. Mustafa Mahmoud was an Egyptian physician, philosopher, writer, and science fiction author. He wrote 5 books criticizing Marxism. The most known is titled Collapse of the Left. From 1971, he was the regime's media arm, hosting more than 400 program episodes on TV under the title Science and Faith. This name has been coined by the Egyptian President Anwar Sadat to symbolize and brand the hope that Egypt could benefit from a closer integration with the international market, the new liberal market, while preserving its unique cultural identity.
احنا النهارده هنسهر مع الكون والغازه. الكون عرضه 15 مليار سنة ضوئية، وعمره 15 مليار سنة زمنية. في فرق بين السنة الضوئية والسنة الزمنية. السنة الزمنية ده مقياس للزمن، إنما السنة الضوئية دي وحدة مسافة. عشان تعرفوا السنة الضوئية دي طولها قد إيه، هقول لكم الثانية الضوئية طولها 300,000 كيلومتر، دي الثانية. فعشان نعرف السنة الضوئية طولها قد إيه هتضرب بقى 300,000 في 60 في 60 في 24 في 30 في 12، يطلع لنا 3 وقدامها 14 صفر. وبعدين نرجع نضرب تاني في 15,000 مليون اللي هي 15 مليون، فتطلع لنا رقم قدامه 25 صفر. شوفوا بقى قد ايه رقم قدامه 25 صفر كيلو متر. ده عرض الكون. ايه ده؟ شوف لما ربنا يقول جنة عرضها السماوات والارض، تبقى جنة ايه دي؟ ادي العرض ده وشفناه، عرض السماوات والارض شفناه بالمقياس الفلكي، رقم قدامه 25 صفر، يعني مليون 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 الى اخره كيلو متر.
The image of the world in 2067 that Mustafa Mahmoud has envisioned in the novel is an entity born out of multiple disasters, a means of survival branded as solidarity, an accumulation of several disasters that began 100 years earlier, a future that transcends and surpasses all traditions, I mean intellectual and ideological traditions. The character of Dr. Shaheen is hostile to the past. He knows exactly what has happened in the last 100 years. He knows how certain infrastructure began and how it ended.
حلم العالم الواحد والحكومة الواحدة، حيث كل الموارد مكرسة لخدمة الجميع في أخوة حقيقية، وحيث الكل يعمل في محبة قدر طاقته ويأخذ بالمحبة قدر حاجته. قامت الاشتراكية أخيرا على أساسها الصحيح، ليست بحتمية الاقتصاد وحدها، وإنما بحتمية الحب. ويتوافر العامل النفسي الذي يجمع القلوب والأيدي على العمل المخلص البناء. وفي سنوات 10 كان العالم الجديد قد بدأ يقوم من العدم. تكاتفت ملايين الأذرع لتحقق المستحيل. حولت الطاقة الذرية إلى قنبلة خيرة تنشر النعمة في كل مكان، تقلب مياه البحر المالحة إلى مياه عذبة، وتروي الصحاري وتحفظ الغذاء بدون تثليج، وتمد الإنسان بسبل مواصلات هائلة السرعة ورخيصة التكاليف، وتقدم للمواطن وقودا سهلا أنظف من البترول وأقوى منه آلاف المرات. أمكن باستخدام هذه الطاقة الجديدة تكييف جو المدن، وإنزال المطر في الريف، وإحداث الرطوبة والجفاف على حسب الطلب، واستنباط فواكه جديدة وخضروات جديدة.
The character of Dr. Shaheen belongs to a short segment of time, a segment that begins in 1967. Despite the geopolitical context that has shaped the character of Dr. Shaheen, his past is ultimately and intimately connected to the planetary scale. And the world where he lives is an excessive model of a new liberal world, a utopian and modernized shell, holding in between its walls a dystopian world. But no wonder Mustafa Mahmoud's speculation are based on the projected seeds of his reality. In the 1970s, Egypt enacted a law numbered 43/1974, which became known as Infitah, meaning openness or opening the door, to end the era of socialism in Egypt and encourage domestic and foreign investment in the private sector. Mustafa Mahmoud's conservative speculation on the notion of globalism and the future of how the new liberalism deal with the future that we not only seems to be heading toward, but on the brink of.
على مدى العصور والحضارات كانت تبنى المدن لحماية الإنسان بمساحات ضيقة، وبعد الثورة الصناعية بنيت المدن لتضع الآلة والسيارة والمصنع قبل الإنسان. المدن التي تدعي أنها هي الأفضل في العالم يقضي فيها الإنسان سنين من حياته من أجل التنقل، وسوف تتضاعف هذه المدة في 2050. في 2050 سوف يهجر مليار إنسان بسبب ارتفاع انبعاثات الكربون وارتفاع منسوب مياه البحار. اليوم بصفتي رئيس مجلس إدارة نيوم نقدم لكم ذا لاين، مدينة مليونية بطول 170 كيلو تحافظ على 95% من الطبيعة في أراضي نيوم، 0 سيارات، 0 شوارع، و0 انبعاثات كربونية.
Contemporary cities couldn't cope with growth. The contemporary city needs a full redesign. What if we removed cars? What if we got rid of streets? What if we innovated in the public space? What if we built around nature instead of over it? What if everything you needed was always a 5-minute walk away? What if invisible technology generates carefree and open urban space? What if sustainability was not a goal, but a given? What if we replace replace outdated urban services with new services driven by artificial intelligence? What if we built the line? A 170-kilometer revolution in urban living. Protecting the Earth's most stunning nature while creating unmatched livability. A home to all of us. Welcome to the line. Neom.
Let's get back to Dr. Shaheen. Dr. Shaheen's attitude and position could be very critical, very provocative. If it had been discussed a few decades earlier, but Dr. Shaheen lives in a future where traditions are surpassed, intellectual, epistemological, and ethical traditions surpassed, but exist as sediments of failure, a paradoxical history, an accumulation of a century of ambivalence and paradoxical struggles.
ورأينا التاريخ تقرره أشياء في نفوس الناس وليس مجرد تصارع بين طبقاتهم. والظاهر أن الطبيعة البشرية مركبة ومعقدة أكثر مما تصور الفلاسفة القدماء، وأن التفسير الواحدي للإنسان والتاريخ جميل ولكن فيه تبسيطا مخلا بالحقيقة. ونحن نقول الآن إن هناك أشياء في نفوسنا نتعارك من أجلها، كما أن هناك أشياء في الخارج نتعارك عليها، وأن العامل الاقتصادي والعامل النفسي يشكلان معا كل موقف نتخذه. ولو أننا قلنا هذا الكلام منذ 100 عام أيام أجدادنا درويش الماركسية أئمة المادية الجدلية في ذلك الوقت لحسبونا حساب الملكين. لكن هناك أشياء كثيرة تغيرت في الدنيا وغيرت معها عقول الناس بأسرع مما توقع جميع المفكرين. ونعود إلى كلامنا لنحكي بقية المأساة.
What we see here is a headline of an Egyptian newspaper, Al-Ahram, one of the oldest newspaper, governmental newspaper in Egypt, established 1875. But this image is from just last year, December 29, 2022, so less than a month ago. The very bold headline says, "The next is better." They used an Arabic word called al-qadim, means it could be like means the next or the future or the coming. So it's a warning and an invitation. A warning to wait, an invitation to move. To wait and to move is like standing in a queue. But in the queue, you wait your turn, an individual turn. But here, in this case, it's a collective turn, a collective move. Time moves, but you have to wait. Here is the headline of Al Mesa newspaper. But this is for May 29, 1967. The red headline says, "We will achieve our goals." We will, but not yet. So you have to wait until we achieve our goals. So the future tense is used as a strategy, a postponement. We will. The use of the future tense is an indication of time as a verb of will. Will characterize the promises. A verb is a promise at the present time to create time for promises in the future. the future tense is often used in this way to create an opportunity to make a promise for future situations.
أحلامنا مع ثورة 52 الحقيقة كانت باستمرار متجددة. كانت واخدة تأييد شعبي كبير قوي من كل الأطراف وبالذات من جيلي، يعني باستمرار عندهم لنا مفاجأة يخلونا فرحانين قوي.
أتى يوم 15 مايو 64 ليتوج كفاح الشعب من أجل بناء حياته، ولكن ها قد تحققت الأحلام ووقف جمال عبد الناصر ليخاطب شعبه لحظة تحويل مجرى النيل قائلا: هنا أمام الدنيا كلها رمز حي لإرادتكم وتصميمكم ومقدرتكم على العمل وعلى الفداء.
كان وقتها كل ما نطلب حاجة يقولوا بعد السد العالي الثراء هيعم البلاد، بعد السد العالي الكهرباء هتخش كل حتة، بعد كل شيء بعد السد العالي، لدرجة ان احنا تشبعنا بروح ان السد العالي ده هيبقى خاتم سليمان. وقتها كنت انا واختي بنلف اوروبا، ولما قررت انا واختي نعمل تجربة رحلة الاوتوستوب، في الرحلة دي كان كل حاجة انه يقولوا لنا عندكم ده، نقول after the high dam we'll have this، يقولوا لنا عندكم after the high dam we'll have this. واحد بيقول لنا do you have snow in Egypt؟ فاختي نسيت وقالت بجديه شديده after the high dam we'll have snow in Egypt. فاحنا كنا باستمرار على الجانب الدفاعي عن مصرنا اللي بنحبها وعن ثورتنا اللي بنأيدها وعن احلامنا اللي متاكدين 100% انها هتحصل.
This was an excerpt of a documentary named Four Women of Egypt by Tahani Rashid, 1997. We heard Safinaz Kazim. She's an Egyptian literary critic and journalist, reveal her memories of the 1952 revolutions. After the High Dam, we will have this, which makes sense, because Aswan High Dam is one of the, or used to be one of the largest hydroelectric dams. So no wonder when you are promised that you will have everything in terms of infrastructure.
There were 6 principles: to put an end to colonialism, to put an end to feudalism, put an end to corrupted of exploitation by capitalism, to have a social justice, to have a strong national army for the people, and to build up real democracy.
No wonder to give trust in a national project led by a group of revolutionary officers established the first Egyptian Republic in 1952. A socialist republic at the time, and that was the global trend at the time. Principles could be part also of an ideological infrastructure, the nation-state infrastructure, Arab nationalism, to be part of the Red internationalism liberation movement at the time. It's not surprising that certain generations put their trust in promises after a century of colonialism, a very complicated and complex time in which they never thought of national liberation. They were an object of a global conflict in which they were forced to participate in a conflict where they are not part of it.
عبد انتوا مجانين، عايزين تلموا البوليس الحربي. رجع ثالث في كلامه، انصعب عليه الراجل.
يا ابني انت كنت مش موافق 100%.
فكرت، لقيت الالمان اخطر من الانجليز على مصر، وبقت الراجل ده هنبقى بنساعدهم.
اخطر ايه بس؟ ده خطتنا هتغير التاريخ، 50 سنه احتلال هيتنحوا في ثانيه.
وخلاص، انا كلفت مرسي يراقب ضابط مخابرات انجليزي لسه نازل تظهر معلومات، وبقى لنا يومين مراقبين.
حلو،
ومنه هنعرف غواصة صاحبنا هترسى فين.
حلو. الغواصة توصل من هنا،
نصطاد تشرشل من هنا.
طخ. فين الشرشر؟ لاصوا الانجليز، دخلوا الالمان، خلصنا من الانجليز. طخ طخ طخ.
After the 1952 revolutions and the liberation from British colonialism, the national infrastructure wasn't purely national, but an object of a post-war period, Cold War. July 25th, 1954, a ship docked on the shore of the port of Alexandria. Although it's a fishing boat, but Dr. Scharfen is on board. Dr. Scharfen is a fake name for a real German missile engineer. He came across the Mediterranean Sea to find a job in North Africa.
دي عشان تسجيل ارتفاع، ودي ضغط، ودي درجة حرارة، ودي عشان الإشعاع بتاع الصوت.
أيوة يا مستر شرف.
مستر رشدي، في حاجة مهم أوي. أنا عاوز كل نص ثانية مرصد يكتب كل حاجة.
حاضر يا مستر شرف.
علشان أنا إذا كان يموت خسارة كبيرة عشان كل الناس. كل الناس يجي زعلان أوي أوي.
طبعا يا مستر شرف، إنما إن شاء الله مش هيحصل حاجة وحشة أبدا.
مستر رشدي واخد باص ممكن يعملته كل دي يشتغل. أنا.
The Egyptian missile program was launched in 1958 as an ambitious plan to transform the country and aspired to leadership role in the Arab world. In the spirit of pan-Arabism, Egypt and Syria joined together, form of a short-lived United Arab Republic, UAR, and began an ambitious program of military industrialization. A space program also followed. Egypt turned to unemployed German scientists and technicians to advance its missile efforts. A multitude of projects in which fiction cannot be distinguished from reality. The image of the state depended on the imagination of the future. Projects like the Egyptian spacecraft, it was in the newspaper, launched in 1965, but has not yet returned.
جاءت أيام الأعياد، أعياد الثورة العربية المجيدة. جاءت أعياد يوليو، أعياد المجد، أعياد العزة، أعياد أمتنا العربية المجيدة الظافرة. واستقبلت القاهرة عاصمة الجمهورية العربية المتحدة أيام العيد، أيام يوليو الخالدة بأروع مظاهر البهجة الغامرة. فقد مضت 10 سنوات من الكفاح البطولي في كل الميادين. مضت 10 سنوات مليئة بالعمل والعرق والإصرار. وتغير وجه مصر، تغير وجه تاريخها، تغير واقعه وتغير وجوده. ومع مطلع الاحتفالات بالعيد العاشر للثورة، عاشت جمهوريتنا أروع تجربة في تاريخها الحديث. عاشت تجربة دخولها الظافر عصر الفضاء. وشهد الرئيس جمال عبد الناصر قائد الثورة العربية المظفرة تجربة إطلاق الصواريخ العربية في قاعدة الصواريخ في قلب الصحراء. وصاحب السيد الرئيس المشير عبد الحكيم عامر نائب رئيس الجمهورية والقائد العام للقوات المسلحة، والسادة نواب رئيس الجمهورية ورؤساء أركان حرب الأسلحة الثلاثة، وصافح الرئيس مستقبليه بين مظاهر الحفاوة والبهجة من العاملين في القاعدة. وقصد وصل الرئيس ومرافقوه إلى حيث أجريت أول تجربة لإطلاق الصواريخ العربية القاهر والظافر.
The Republic was short-lived. The morning of June 5th, 1967, marked the end of all these nationalist socialist projects and the preparation and to prepare the region to the beginning of a new era, to join the global capital market. Egypt turned to a different form of infrastructure that could integrate into emerging global market.
من دمشق هنا القاهرة.
Since there are multiple futures in each segment of time, when I feel the urge to resist the prevailing speculation, I remind myself that the future is back there. The future is a segment that has not yet been healed. If I have to prepare and speculate for the future that will come in the coming segment, I have to heal the future that I missed. In a pre-modern era, in the year 1100, the Ismailism Nizari, it's a branch of Muslim faith. For them, the day of the resurrection or Armageddon or apocalypse have already taken place. And we live in a post-Armageddon or post-apocalypse era. So for them, the future is almost over. For them, the Nizari, because they were a revolutionary movement and their call came from no one should wait. So they call the people to not wait when the day of the resurrection or the disaster or apocalypse. Because if it's all of this, it's just like a kind of disaster. So the disaster has already been done. And we are in the post-disaster era, so we're resurrected already. So you have to resist now, don't wait. The future is time, and time does not exist. But we can indicate time, of course, with narration. So to create our future, we need to compose our own narration. But those narrations are not completely contradicted with each other's. It does not work like certain narrations versus other narrations, of course. Talking about infrastructure, the planet has one narration that intersects with these multiple futures, multiple narrations. Infrastructure as a concept overlaps with others in some ways. So initially, at the beginning, my thought process was based on a dichotomous way of thinking about who is in power and who is not, the dominant narrative and the counter narrative, who has been defeated and who has not, past versus future. But then I realized that the complexity of all these concepts and notions, I realized that despite the ambivalence between all of these parties and elements, we share the same future, both the future I missed back there and the future that we were heading towards. Because the future is an event or a radical closure, a worldly disaster that takes place in dramatic change.
One path is we stay on Earth forever, and then there will be some eventual extinction event. The alternative is to become a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, which I hope you would agree that is the right way to go. Yes?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Debo. Thank you.
Are there any questions in the audience, or do you need a second to refresh this?
You can turn on the light.
Any remarks, questions, ideas? So maybe I'll start. If this was the first part of the project, what is going to happen in the next parts?
Like technically, I think like I'm going to narrow down, like, because I was the first part I was try to somehow compose every material and every segment that I would like to discuss. So yeah, sometimes I feel it's overwhelmed with material, and sometimes I feel like there's some associations between the materials that I'm the only one who can associate. So it needs some time, like for me, it needs more effort theoretically and even formally to narrow down some questions. Talking about methodology is also like thinking about how you can weave or compose certain narrative from a fiction of archive, but it's a fiction archive, not from like the physical archive, or like real archives, the archives that we consider is real, because actually also fiction and reality in archive, it's very relevant. Yeah, I don't know, like, if it was clear.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I'm just looking at this constellation here, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you feel about referring to persons and then these sort of technological events or efforts, or these sort of like, you see like there's persons here, and then these sort of like moments or like these coagulations of technology. And so how you think about those as characters, like both as people, but then as these sort of like, let's say, nodes of technologies like gathering, and how that functions in narrative for you. Like, I think it's really interesting how you have the narrative play out through persons as well as like these situations?
Actually, working on characters or figures or persons, for me, like it came from the root of like at the end of the day, I try to weave narrative, and narrative it has somehow it intersect with drama components. Even if we're talking about history, it's a story. So, and for me, formally, I stuck usually with characters. Like one of the drama components is the characters itself, antagonist, protagonist, etc. So although I'm talking here about like different, like as I said, like technology infrastructure, which is like inhuman or like inanimate objects, but I'm in the stage of I'm still thinking about infrastructure within like still human like figures or characters. Like sometimes also like fictional or non-human, like like a character like alien or something. But I mean like this kind of the figure or the character, because yeah. So from the thing for for also other sense also is while I'm thinking about the project and about like within infrastructure, I try usually to like to balance between I'm talking about very particular material, but I mean like materials that it has a particular geopolitical and regional thing, like for example like a fictional movie or novel from Egypt, for example. So the idea of making a diagram when you can weave and float all over other characters, I think, or I try to use this methodology or way to make like this particular, it's more open that you can reach other things. Like I mean like you can think about it globally. So it's not about, for example, it's not about high dam as a high dam in Egypt. It's about infrastructure and water and the hydroelectric infrastructure. It's not about Mustafa Mahmoud as a just Egyptian writer novelist, but it's about any conservative right-wing media arm of government. So the idea of characters and the connection that I tried to create, or this associate between all of them and each others, is for me like a strategy. I try. I don't know, like if it, like if this kind of strategy or method sometimes achieve what I'm looking for, but it's a way of also think about it. Yeah.
And speaking about infrastructure and working globally and thinking globally, how do you organize your life between Vienna and Egypt and the Netherlands?
You mean like?
It's also like thinking of different places and orders.
Like how I think, how I perceive it. I mean like how. Yeah, I don't know. Like this idea of thing. Like I feel like I don't know. We are as it's a hard question, but as artists and the students, like we get used to work with like like with a scale of epistemological and like knowledge production that it's already intersect different. And for example, I'm here in Vienna in international programs. So my friend, my colleague from everywhere, we discuss like like somehow common subject and common issues. So in a fact that we are somehow like in knowledge production and art and academy, we are in this like in this stage of internationalism. So like sometimes I perceive, for example, how I perceive like other places. Sometimes I perceive, for example, the infrastructure here from a paradigm that I know more here. I mean, so I'm familiar with infrastructure in somewhere in Egypt, for example. So, but I can understand other context through these other, like through the infrastructure that I get used to it or familiar with as a paradigm. Like paradigm, I mean like as a model of understanding other thing. So. Yeah, so the word became like very flat, so like regarding infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I was trying to follow you and wrap my head around your different registers of the future that you bring up through your characters and the different stories. And you mentioned it already that some are from film, some are more satirical, some seem to have to do with hypercapitalism and economy, or with technocratic solutions for social problems and so on. But if I look at your characters, I also wondered if you're dealing with masculinity in truth.
Yeah, this was actually, this was a question that it was already there most of the time that when I was composing the diagram and I was working on. And yeah, it was very complicated for me because, you know, like, for example, like, when I think about, for example, the sci-fi novel and writing novel in 60s, 70s, which is, you know, like an era, for example, in Egypt, that it was like any other places at the time, like it was very male dominant. So, I mean, like in government, it was very male dominant. So be honest, in this episode, I was struggling with this and thinking about, you know, like, I was questioning, I was asking myself, I'm re-narrating like a male dominant narrative also, even if I claim that I try to weave and textile or weave compose like counter narrative, but I'm reproducing the same. So for some effort, like for thinking about, for example, like thinking about the same segment of time through, for example, that's why I was thinking about the film Four Women of Egypt that Safinas Kazem and other leftist and communist activists in 60s, 70s in Egypt. I decided I was thinking to focus more about it, to have like different perspective about it, but be honest, like at the end I failed that in this episode, because although I'm aware about this this complication and this, you know, like this failure here of me, like or this kind of very tricky that I'm re-narrating a male narrative and male characters, but like process-wise, I felt like in this episode, if I try to think and overwhelm the project with thinking about it, and also, I mean, like performing that I'm aware about this point, try to think about different aspects of how we can get rid of the narratives that tell already by fiction, you know, like by male authors or male novelists. It was very hard for me to you know, like to compose or to overlap other things. So I didn't consider. I know I was aware, but I didn't actually consider here thing. But I think like in this project as umbrella project, it's a priority for me now after working here in this episode to think like different, how we can, you know, like I will simplify the question, like for me, like how I can, like when I narrate or re-narrate or create a narrative in this within this era of 60s, 70s, 50s from a novel and stuff, how I can get rid, or how I can not get rid, how I can maneuver with these male dominant narratives. So I said I didn't succeed here to do it, of course, but yeah, but it was a strategy for me to think about it in the whole project. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was really thinking about it a lot, and I know, like, yeah, frankly speaking, it was like time-wise and stuff, because it was like a sketch for the whole project, and I was expecting this question. Thank you so much. It's a very valuable question, of course.
Hi, thank you you very much for the presentation. It was very, very awesome. Also because I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd. I don't know much about you or your work. I must say I've just like stumbled into it. But now I'm really wondering if you are actually also a writer of sci-fi, or if that's also something that will be part of this project. So, like, do you, by researching all these futures, feel like you are, as an artist, also wanting to create another future scenario, like your own futuristic, like, or maybe fiction or version of reality that we missed? Or are you more like composing the different kinds of historical events and yeah, propose solutions, whether they're fictional, real or in between? So yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, I'm not coming from, like, I'm not writing as novel writers, of course, and I mean like sci-fi or speculative fiction as writing, but I write for moving image. You know, I work with, when I work with video, I write for the moving image itself, which is it's a narrative too. But in this project, you know, like here in this specifically in this project, I thought about like the methodology of, you know, like not writing the whole, like not thinking about to write a sci-fi, but to, as I use usually like the term, to weave from already existing sci-fi novel from certain geopolitical context, and to fill gap or to heal this narrative, you know. So you intervene, or you, as if you sabotage, or you know, like to sabotage versus heal the narratives that already exist. So but on the other hand, how to do it as a meta, so to how to produce speculative fiction, but on the other hand, thinking about how the speculative fiction is produced. So you know, like to produce, but also to think about the process of produce. So as here, for example, like, you know, seems like Mustafa Mahmoud, for example, one of the like other sci-fi and speculative fiction novelist, he used to produce within a context, within like part of a governmental speculation, you know. So we have others actually, you know, maybe they will appear in other episodes of the project, novelists from the Communist Party at the time. So they work within different sphere of different perspective of speculation. So they have their own speculation about labor, etc., etc. So yeah, so what I'm doing is actually to heal and to weave already the existing. Yeah.
So if there are no more very important questions, is there another one? Yes.
I was just, so I'm still wondering also about this idea of future, because, and what I thought somehow most of the ideas are from the past, so it's past ideas about the future, and it's only particular ones, as you said, it's specifically ideas that are connected to technological ideas and solutions, and somehow I was thinking of things work about the ruins of capitalism, that they somehow seem to me like ruins of the capitalism already, and maybe the Line and Elon Musk are already also ruins of capitalism, even though they are not realized. And I somehow had the impression that you maybe laid out some ruins of particular ideas about the future, and that the work to somehow build imagination out of that starts from there. And it's maybe yours, can be your props, or somehow where you start.
So you mean like how I contribute to the, you know, like the future or the statics of the yeah. Yeah, yeah, this is the idea of, you know, like in these episodes, I I try to not to not escape a history, you mean like, or a past that already, as I said, if you feel like this kind of feeling defeated or negativity towards the future, even if like the future is the same and have this kind of going towards the future with a very negative attitude, it makes me feel like it means that we need, for me, we need to discuss disasters that already have done, as I said, like ethically and epistemologically and in a social context, etc., that already didn't really healed yet. So how we can, think about or create a world, create a future world or world making to a future, and in a time that is still, some failures, we're talking about very geopolitical contexts that have different failures of, for example, revolutions doesn't really achieve their goals, etc., etc. So, for example, in Egypt now we are living the same as in 60s. So the same military regime came back. So it really cracked the idea of, of the progressivity to the future. So, and here the negativity came from here. So that's why here if this is a question is I'm going back to a narrative that we don't want to hear about it anymore, of course. But we need to think about, to think about it as I said, as different, because this time was the future of different segment. So, and as I said, during the colonial era in 30-40, they were their future was the liberation, and the liberation came with these, things that so it means that it was a future for other segment of time. So yeah, from here, and it's very open. Be honest, I'm not it's not a stance or a position that I created. It's still very open-ended, very open process for me to think how to speculate and think about future. On the other hand, considering and thinking about the past. So because it's how, because we are thinking about time. So yeah, I'm be honest, I'm not sure about this how it's productive for speculative fiction production to go back and to think about it, to think about the future within the past, but also it has to do with this kind of linearity, how I can dismantle these linearities that, the past is back there and the future is in front of me. And yeah, so just I was thinking, thinking loudly with you about the question.
I'm gonna do another thinking out loudly because I'm not exactly sure how to ask this, but it builds up on what you just said. I was also thinking about your refusal of wanting to engage with an optimistic or hopeful future, right? That I see as a kind of clear statement to some of the theories and rhetorics and, let's say, ideologies of the future that are being produced today also. So I wanted to ask, if you will work with those arguments concretely of today, or if you're particularly interested in kind of foreshadowing that or implying that through the lens backward, because you're doing a negation, kind of a negation in the negation, or the depression, right? Re-de and on those notions. As ways of kind of as I'm reading it, as to disengage from the escape into the future. And maybe I'm going to say the last thing, and I hope this is going to somehow make my question at least palpable, is within that is the concept of what is the future of the future, you know, like how do you approach it, I guess, in those multiple directions?
You mean like, yeah, just you mean like how the future is multiple, or how the future is? No, I didn't.
Maybe just the first part. Like,
Sorry.
Okay, let me try. I guess more the question of like, are there concrete sources, moments, theories that you are looking at today that you are feeling in distance of when we are talking about constructing ideologies of the future?
Okay. Yeah, there's actually, yeah, now it's clear. There's actually for me, like, be honest, like just recently I have not have to reference, but there's two references that already, you know, like occupy my mind. One of the, Italian philosopher, young Italian philosopher, Federico Campagna, that he's tried to actually in his last book, Magic and Technique and Magic. He says about, you know, like he tried to understand the time and the future from this segment, the idea of segment, that that time does not exist but exists by narration, that as I said, and past, present, future is narration. So when narration starts, a segment start, and then when narration ends, the segment it ends. So, and narration here could be anything. Could be like a certain civilization, a certain culture, a certain culture production that it ends with a disaster. Also, like the idea, it's a complicated idea of surpassing some tradition or culture that disappear. That it means like the end of this segment, which is the future of the segment. So you think about the future, the past, present, future as a lot of segments. So we live now in maybe we live in the future already, or in the edge of the future. So anyway, I don't want to proceed a lot about here, but on all of the other the other reference that is occupied me recently also. It's the idea in certain, you know, like certain medieval Arab Muslim production of time about the non-linearity of time. That how in some philosophers like Averroes and Avicenna, they think a lot about the linearity, the non-linearity of time. The linearity of time that we are not just heading to future. Future could be in, you know, like to think about it as a constellation, not as a line that here past, present, future, but to think about it as a constellation that you can move within it, mythologically, fictionally, etc., etc. So I'm very actually just recently, you know, like not obsessed, but I was very, you know, like I'm interested about this idea of non-linearity of time. That how this kind of the idea of the concept of non-linearity of time can somehow, in theory, resist the idea of time in modernity. So because in modernity, time is linear. There's pre-modern, post-modern, etc., etc. So how can we, within this pre-modern, I will use a modern term, pre-modern knowledge production about non-linearity of time, can somehow not resist, but negotiate this idea of linearity of time with modernity. I don't know if it's clear or not, but just think about linearity and linearity of time.
Maybe we can continue with a drink. Yes. Thank you so much, Mohamed Abdelkarim. Thank you so much for coming. Have a nice evening and a great year, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.